but there wasn't any real rivalry.
And you know, one wonderful thing you guys have done, and I'm thankful for this, Dave Rockwell has written a book with the help of all the guys from the Ram Chargers, Tom Hoover, and all of them, a lot of wonderful photographs. And Dave, tell me about the book, and what was it like to take on the project of recording all this history?
It was huge. My wife suggested to me one evening, we've talked about this before, and we've been inducted into the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame. We were driving home. One of the guys at the event, Danny Mancini, said, hey, you know, somebody ought to write a book, because things had kind of gotten muddled up in the introduction of us into the Hall of Fame, and a lot of just kind of inaccurate information. So on the way home, my wife said, you know, well, geez, you can write okay. Maybe you ought to write a book. And I'll tell you what, she regretted that comment. It was 10 long years, and everybody in the group kind of banded together, hundreds of hours of interviews and so forth. Said it was a project that we succeeded at, even though it didn't have wheels. But we're real proud of it. The book's done exceptionally well. It's best-selling books ever been published by the Society of Automotive Engineers. I think it's quite well written. All the reviews on the book have been great, and we're really excited the way it turned out, because the point was really to capture the history as it happened and get the factual story out about what really happened in the development of the Chrysler program that took it really from a strictly passenger car-based company to what you see out here today, because practically everything here emanated from the evolution that the book kind of outlines.
Well, getting back to the product that you guys had a hand in creating, of course, the Max Wedge, the Race Hemi, the Street Hemi, and you know, I got to say, as a muscle car enthusiast, I love them all, but it's painfully clear that a thing like the Pontiac GTO was an interesting vehicle, but essentially a station wagon motor in a very well-marketed car. By contrast, things like the Superstock, the Max Wedge 62, 3, and 4 cars were very serious, highly engineered cars. Did you guys feel frustration at the idea that your cars had more content in them, but they weren't selling like GTOs? Any thoughts on that one, John?
Well, I don't think that we had a real concern about that. We just wanted to make the best race car we could make. I'm sure our marketing folks were concerned about the sales, but like Dick said earlier, we were just interested in racing, and we did the best job we could, whether it was developing the Max Wedge, whether it was developing the Hemi, or the chassis, or the transmission, the torque converter. We just try to do the best job, the most competitive job we could. So, that's kind of the way we managed things. It was on an equal plane, because after the best competition, best cars we could make.
Now, of course, we live in 1966 with the advent of the Street Hemi. It's probably the most potent, readily available horsepower package of the 1960s, really, and an awful lot of power for the average guy. Dick, was there any sense that the Street Hemi was too much for the average Joe? What was your thought when that came out and was available to anybody?
No, I didn't think the Street Hemi was too much. It was a nice street car that had a lot of power. There'd been a lot of durability tests run. So it was not a race car put on the street. It was a street car that ran like a race car.
Now, you mentioned durability testing, and I know that it's probably the stuff that happens on the proving grounds. The average Joe would love to be able to see, but it's top secret. But any stories you want to share regarding maybe some Hemi development cars you guys were able to take home and test, or any stories come to mind about stuff you got to take home and play with? David?
Well, I'll just tell you one little story. I was in college at the time, and I was really blessed. I was kind of the boy Friday for the team. I wasn't a full-fledged engineer. I came home from Michigan State for Christmas vacation in 1965, and sitting out behind the building was the original prototype Street Hemi Plymouth Satellite. And I'd heard I'd actually been up at school, so I just had read a little bit about that such a motor was coming. I walked into the garage, our garage, race car garage. Guys were working on stuff that night, and I kind of pitched in. And there was actually one of the original Street Hemi motors sitting on a wooden pallet that was kind of in the corner, which sometimes happened at the garage. Stuff like that would pop up. Anyway, Tom Hoover, who was our motor builder and the father of the Hemi, said to me, you know, let's take a break from building the motor. Let's go down Woodward and see if we can find some GTOs with that street Hemi. So Dick Maxwell, who was the head of product planning, he had the keys. He threw the keys to me, and I said, let's go. So Hoover and I went out on Woodward Avenue. About 12, 15 minutes later, we were rolling in low gear, about 10 miles an hour beside a GTO. And by the time we found third gear, I mean, that guy was so far gone. But it scared the hell out of him. I managed that baby. I had a 383 Magnum 4-speed at the time, and I was used to that baby. I was used to just smacking it down. And I smacked that thing down. I thought it was going to do a wheel stand. It took all my nerve just to leave the pedal down.
Is we have to remember that for the most part, you know, the Chrysler high-performance vehicle package was over-engineered. You guys seem to build them from the back to the front. Let's talk about the Dana 60 rear axle. At a time, you know, when your average Chevelle or GTO would have a 12-bolt rear axle with C-clips, something could very easily break. You guys are putting Dana 60s in the back of street Hemi 4-speed cars and 444 speeds. Anybody care to talk about the development of the Dana 60 rear axle in its production forms? Any remembrances of that? And why'd you have to step up to that from the 8 3/4?
I don't think any of us, the three here, were involved in that, but I know that the mindset was, if it didn't work, we'd find something that would. And the smaller rear axle didn't work. It would break on occasion. So we stepped up to it. That's basically it.
You know, the Chrysler's motto for many years has been extra care in engineering. It makes a difference. And sure enough, another detail found on those street Hemi vehicles was a thing called a torque box. Of course, we all know that those are additional plates welded into the front leaf spring bulkhead. I'm guessing on the proving grounds, you guys were launching the cars and finding the leaf springs were starting to work the body. Anybody remember the torque box campaign and why that came to be? That's okay. But one thing I love...
That really would probably be Jim Thornton's arena, who was one of our drivers and president of the club long term. He was really a suspension guy and could probably in some detail explain that to you. I'm sorry, Steve. Jim's in Toledo. He's retired, owns some car washes. He does have some health problems with some brushes with cancer, but seems to be holding his own, and he was down with us, and well, I guess he wasn't in Carlisle, but he was down with us in Detroit and earlier in the year, and you know, still very much part of the group.
Well, I guess we're getting close to the end, and if anybody would like to ask a question of the Ram Chargers, feel free. Sir, why not?
Yeah, I guess just to everybody, what was your favorite year being in the club?
I'd have to say 1965. In my opinion, was the greatest year in the history of drag racing. That's really when the Hemi came into its own. The group was able to develop the fuel injection system for it. We went to nitromethane. It had altered wheelbase. The performance jumped over 2 seconds. The cars jumped probably over 20 miles an hour. Week to week, it was just, and the car was extremely successful and exciting and all that. So it was all new. So 60 and the other factories were very much involved, certainly Ford, and it was just, and the fuel dragster really came into its own in 1965, and it was just about unbeatable, at least when it came to setting records. So that was, for me, a fantastic year.
Yeah, I would agree with Dave. 64, 65, there was so much happening and so much progress. You know, with the Hemi, and that's when I really started working in motorsports. So it's a very memorable time for me.
Yeah, I concur with 65 because that was a time not only Chrysler but GM and Ford were really getting into the racing, and so it was a lot of fun to be at the strips week after week because there was something new happening all the time.
Well, great stuff. Okay, I guess we'll end it. Any other questions from the audience? Okay, we're going to wrap it up with a trivia question. We haven't talked about the first Ram Chargers team car, but we may remember that it was a Plymouth business coupe with a 354 Hemi mounted really high in the chassis. It was built for C altered, I believe, and you guys set some records with that car. For the first person who can raise their hand and tell me what the nickname of that car was, you're going to win a 6-pack Super Bee. And I think I saw your hand come up first, sir. What was the name of that car?
High and Mighty.